Hello and welcome. My name is Judith Meyer, and I'm going to talk about Don't Misunderestimate Brexit. But first, a few things about myself. So, a lot of you probably know me from previous Polyglot gatherings and Polyglot conferences. I've been in the community for a while, and I've also authored a bunch of books, especially Complete Esperanto, and a series on script hacking, on learning different scripts. So if you'd like, check out these books, all published by Teach Yourself. And otherwise, my talk today is not about these books at all, but about language in politics, and also how we as polyglots can keep up with the rapid evolution of language. And this is because for the past few years, I've been part of a political movement called the Democracy in Europe Movement 2025, or short DM25, founded by Yanis Varoufakis. And in the course of that, I've come in contact with a lot of language issues. I mean, for a while, I was organizing the translator teams. Now I'm more in the political and technical direction of the movement. And we always come across these issues, and it's really sharpened my eye for how politics plays into language. So let me show you a few things about that. Brexit is, of course, a very clear example of a word that has entered our language that we didn't know 5 years ago. It didn't exist 10 years ago, and everyone knows it now. I think even if you go to Asia, to Africa, they probably know the word Brexit. So politics has the ability to rapidly expand our vocabulary. And it doesn't apply just to Brexit. People have been creating other neologisms based on the same root, like Brextension, Brelection, Remain, Nexit, Frexit, and Brexit. Brexit was even before Brexit. It was in 2010 to 2015 when the question was whether Greece would leave the eurozone. And basically, when we have such a huge new topic, there tends to be a neologism about it. And usually it's the same across languages. Sometimes each language invents their own little thing. But this is not the only thing. I mean, it's clear that when we have a new topic like coronavirus, everyone just starts to learn this term. But politics influences our language on a more deep level, because whatever politicians say also tends to enter the language, at least if they're important politicians. For example, American President Bush, coined the word misunderestimate. He said they misunderestimated me, and it has become a word. I mean, it's a mix, obviously, a mess up of misunderstand and underestimate, but it just seems so useful that people have started to use it. Or Trump said coffee fee. Now, actually, I see that I think Bloomberg or Forbes, no, I don't remember. I think it was Bloomberg created a coffee fee index to describe the effect of Trump's tweets on the economy, on the stock market in particular. So whatever they say, even if it's a mistake, it tends to stay with us. And this was most recently demonstrated also by Chancellor Merkel in Germany. She was complaining that people are talking about Öffnungsdiskussionsorgie. It's like, for those who don't know German, but I think a lot of you do, it's like an orgy, a discussion orgy about opening up after coronavirus. So she coined this word, which hadn't been used at all before she said it. And then suddenly it was a thing. And I think like a million people started using that on Twitter the same day or the next day. It's really crazy how politicians have the ability to just add words to our language. And this seems to be, to me at least, it seems to be a big driver of a language evolution, because I also know efforts of singers to introduce new vocabulary, like La Perdita Generacio is an Esperanto band that tends to use neologisms in their songs, hoping to make them more popular. And it just doesn't seem to work as easily as just Trump mis-saying something or Merkel using some particular word, and then suddenly everyone's using it. So apart from neologisms, which are really the easiest to spot, there are also shifts of meaning that we can observe in language, and sometimes they're different between countries or between parts of the society. The word that in DiEM25 is perhaps the most controversial is the word comrade, because for some of the people in our movement, it's really a key word to describe each other. It's like brothers in arms. It's people that you wouldn't call friends because they're much more than friends. They've gone through thick and thin with you. They've, you know, you can call them a comrade, and that's the only word that applies. Whereas there are also other people in the movement, mainly in Eastern Europe, but also some Americans, for example, who really object to being called a comrade and who have completely different associations with that word based on their rejection of communism or at least authoritarianism. But even a word like friend can have completely different meanings across countries, or at least usages, implications, connotations. In China, I was often surprised that salespeople would talk to me, let's 做朋友, let's become friends and make you a good deal. And it's just, for me as a German, it's completely unthinkable to talk of friendship with someone that I've met like less than an hour ago. It's crazy. Um, Similarly, there's in German and English, there's a huge difference between socialist and social. If you think of Bernie Sanders, his campaign is actually proud to call their policies socialist, whereas in German you definitely wouldn't call them sozialistisch because that is basically communist. It only refers to things that East Germany invented. We call those sozialistisch, and everything else is sozial, social, like good for the community. So depending on whether you like a particular social policy or you don't like it, you might call something sozial or sozialistisch in German. If you look at countries that have the word democratic in their name, you can see that the word democratic in country naming means something completely different than what most people would expect. German Democratic Republic, Democratic Republic of the Congo, Democratic People's Republic of Korea, and the Democratic Republic of Vietnam, basically the least democratic countries around, or some of the least. In this goes across all languages. So one example that I've come across a lot in Greek, because one of my passions is Greek, is the word mnemonio, which is, well, it's literally MOU. It's Memorandum of Understanding, a kind of treaty. And so instead of saying treaty, the Greek word mnemonio, it has a connotation of demanding a lot of cuts to pensions and to salaries and raising the value added tax and all kinds of nasty policies. So it's really a curse word, mnemonio. Whereas in English, if you say MOU, I know that one of the recent, a European leader recently said, we're going to sign an MOU with Greece, and they thought something positive that would help Greece, but they're words that you just can't use the same way. Also, depending which word you use, you may be revealing something about your politics. And this is something that language learners have to pay particular attention to, because often we just know one word for a particular concept, and we have to make sure that that word is actually conveying things the way that we intend them to. And it's not something that brands us as some kind of lunatic. So, an example, if you call something climate change or you call something climate catastrophe, is definitely a way to reveal your political opinion. Also, now in coronavirus times, in Germany, there's the word China-Schnupfen, which basically translates to Chinese sniffles. And as you can guess, this word is used mainly by those who don't believe in coronavirus or who think that it's completely harmless. So if you think, oh, the Germans have found a nice new word for coronavirus called a China-Schnupfen, no, don't just adopt this word. Ask a German friend what you are communicating by calling it that. It's not every cute new word is a good word. And in German, another example is that we actually have 3 words for suicide. One is Selbstmord, which translates to self-murder. Another word is Freitod, which translates to free death. And the third one is Suizid, which is basically just a Latin-based word, suicide. So it's really a medical kind of term. Most people wouldn't use it. They don't talk of suicide. So when you read the newspapers or when you read obituaries, you will mainly see Selbstmord and Freitod. And based on which word you see, you can also tell the opinion that someone has about this particular death. If they're talking about a friend who killed themselves, they're much less likely to call it a murder, a self-murder. They're more likely to call it a freely chosen death, a Freitod. So just based on your opinion of that particular death, you can convey it based on the word that you choose for it. Politics can also be revealed in our grammar. This is a really interesting development that happens in a lot of languages at the same time right now. You can see that Oxford Dictionary recently adopted they as a singular pronoun. So when you're not sure or you don't want to specify whether someone is a man or a woman, you can just say they went, even though it's just one person, they went. Or there's also the gender neutral or alternative pronoun e. So instead of he, you can say e, and the accusative would be m instead of him, especially for people who don't identify as a man or woman. So depending on who you meet, they may use they may use your m when it's appropriate. It definitely shows that they're not conservative. They're probably not old left either. They're probably new left or green. Really, it's a small subsection of the population, but identifiable by their politics. In Esperanto, there's a movement to start using the pronoun ri for this, because Esperanto has the pronouns she and li, and also shli, which is a combination of the two, which is like he or she. But if you want to be really open and also accommodate the third gender or other genders, you can say ri, and then it's considered more open than she or li or shli. In Spanish, there's a different movement, which is to just use the generic feminine. So if you have a Spanish friend on Facebook and he starts talking, nosotras estamos amigas, and you're like, what the heck? He's using the us, which is only for groups of women. No, actually, nowadays, in the progressive part of Spanish society, they tend to use the generic feminine. And this is the latest development. Originally, they were trying to use alternative spellings, like this one, amigas, with the a or o becoming an et sign, or maybe an x. You may have seen the spelling with x as well, which also stood for a gender neutral way of writing. At least it couldn't be spoken, but at least in writing. But now the shift has seems to have been towards a generic feminine instead. In French, you will see this kind of spelling with a .e .s, salarié, but with .e .s, showing that you're including also the female workers or employed. In German, you can see it with a star. So originally you might have seen Bürger slash dash innen or something, but now with a star it just means that everyone is included, or without a star with a capital I in the middle of the word, BürgerInnen. Some also say it like that. They don't say Bürgerinnen, but BürgerInnen, to make this distinction in speaking. It's a way to accommodate the insight that women have not been visible enough in our societies, and this is something that you find mainly in the New Left and the Green spectrum. The right wing doesn't tend to innovate so much. I think there's a prohibition against innovation, but they still stick out based on their refusal to innovate. So, for example, the Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung is the only newspaper that still uses the old German orthography, which hasn't been taught in schools for, I think, 15 years now, depending on the state. So they're also setting themselves apart through their use of language. And of course, if you look for the far right, if you're looking at neo-Nazi pamphlets or something, you will see them using the very old German writing, the Fraktur letters, which also identifies their political views, even without having read anything. If you see something spelled like that, you know that you're dealing with the extreme right. So the problem is that these kind of differences are across language. So in all languages, you have these extra words or changes of meanings or choices of words that you have to make, choices of grammar that you have to make. And it's really becoming a lot. So the next part of my presentation will focus on how you can accommodate that in your language learning. Some examples of what you might want to know is in German we have the word postfaktisch, which is post-truth, a very common word. If you're learning Japanese right now, you probably want to know what reiwa means. If you're learning Chinese, you want to know idai ilu, one belt, one road, or the new Silk Road. These are terms that you have to know. Or in Greek, like I said, they have mnemonio, which is basically treaty, but it's become so central to Greek society that they've created a whole lot of words based on this word mnemonio, based on treaty. So, like the main political distinction for the past few years has been mnemoniako and adimnemoniako. So something like treaty-ish and anti-treaty-ish. That's how you can characterize Greek parties: those that are against austerity and those are in favor. And you can hear people accuse each other of being mnemoniako, and it's quite crazy. Everything that goes around this topic. So, how to learn all this? One is you could use these kind of books, like this book about the 100 words that made and unmade the Second Republic, Italian, of course. Quite entertaining to read. I also like to look at the word of the year kind of lists, especially for German. They're also always very funny. So, for example, Rollerchaos. Rollerchaos, Roller is a scooter. And if you live in a major city, you've probably seen these scooters pop up everywhere and changing our traffic. So that is what we express with Rollerchaos in German. Also combinations like Brexit müde, tired of Brexit, gegen Google, to try to use Google to find something that supports an opposing opinion. They're just amazing words that have come into use in any particular year, and you can find these lists. You can also use Google Trends to see how widely something is used right now, or at least how widely it's searched for on the internet. Brexit, for example, you can see the evolution of the word. Basically, In 2010, someone wrote about the possibility of Brexit, I think, but it doesn't even show up. It's not even a blip. But then in 2016, suddenly everyone wants to know what is Brexit. Pastaran is a really interesting example from Italian because it's originally a Persian word. It describes the Ayatollah Khomeini's Revolutionary Guard, like the really um, um, the people who are really enthusiastic about Khomeini and who didn't tolerate any opposition and who were authoritarian about that. And now in Italian, it is used the same way for the fans of particular politicians that have this kind of crazed following. Um, the most fun way to learn these kind of words and also the least difficult way to learn them is really to to do like the natives do. So don't look for dictionaries, don't look for trends or something, but just expose yourself to a lot of these materials. The newspapers will sometimes help because a lot of it, like I said, is related to politics. So if you're reading newspapers, you'll definitely learn the latest terms for coronavirus and Brexit and everything that happens in the country. But also, a lot of the terms are more informal or only used by part of the population, like only progressives. So then you'd have to go to, say, progressive discussion forums or sign up to newsletters in order to learn the words and the language usage that is used in this part of the population. So I really recommend, if you're interested in politics and you might want to talk about politics in a foreign language, you should definitely find some people with similar opinion as yours, and then just look at their language usage, look at the words they're using, look at the uh, especially the inclusive language they're using, feminist language they're using, the words that they use to describe climate change, the words that they use to describe coronavirus, and so on, so that you don't use words that are inappropriate to the opinions that you're holding. One very fun way to learn all this stuff is to use Twitter. I really love to do that. You can go to various websites to find out what the current trends are in any particular country. So Twitter trends for Germany, Twitter trends for Italy, Twitter trends for France, whatever. And when you look at those, you can see you can click through to some of the more interesting terms, and then you basically get a lot of natural usage of the language, and often quite funny too, with memes and so on. Like here, I posted some of the Greek memes that helped me learn Greek in 2015. You know, 2015 was a crazy year for Greece. They had 2 elections and 1 referendum. So people were joking about that all the time. Like in the top meme, it says Tsipras won so many elections. He wants more affirmation than a girl who uploads 3 selfies a day on Instagram. And the bottom one says this shows Tsipras on the beach, and it says, "Oh, I'm going to resign now, and then I'm getting back in the water." So it's just when you find this kind of hashtag, maybe not Kardashian hashtag, but something about language specific, country specific, or about the politics of the time, you will always find something interesting to read. Like not so long ago, you could have found Eröffnungsdiskussionsorgien was also trending on Twitter. And this shows you that people are starting to adopt the word. Whether it stays or not is something that you can check later with Google Trends. but just to see it at the time, happening at the time, to see what people are saying, it's a fun way to spend an hour just improving your language. So that's my quick recommendations. For now, I'm happy to answer your questions. Thank you so much for watching. Okay, I'm interested in how popular words like snowflake have become. Why do you think some words become so popular? Well, it's obviously something that resonates with people. So, like the word Rollerchaos that I showed you from among the top 10 German words of 2019, um, it translates to scooter chaos. So, if a lot of people experience the sudden appearance of scooters in every street corner as chaotic and people who don't know how to drive them or ride them, I guess you'd say, um, it's it resonates with people when they start to use it, and for as long as it resonates, the word keeps getting used. Like I can imagine a future in which mnemoniaco or the memorandums won't be the main distinction in Greek politics because it will be part of the past. But for as long as these treaties are wreaking havoc on Greek policy, this will be a word that is used. And as for snowflake, I guess that there is a part of society that also feels very strongly about people being too sensitive, and others saying that they should have a right to be sensitive or whatever. So it's a discussion, so it keeps getting used. Now, this is not a neologism, it's just an additional meaning that the word has acquired. But it's yeah, it resonates with some people, or it is part of the public discourse. Um, okay, next question. Remy, is there a gender-neutral Hanse for the pronoun ta? Um, Actually, I haven't studied much Chinese for the past 5 years, just enough to keep going. So I'm not on top of whether there is this kind of Hanzi. I know that in speaking, it's already gender neutral because for those who don't know, in Chinese, whether you're saying he, she, or it, it's always ta, so it's no difference. But in writing, as far as I know, you still have to choose between the male ta or the female ta or the it, which is also ta. I don't know. Probably there is, but I don't have the connection to the right kind of people in China. Another question. Vadim Dominov. Have there ever been calls to fully get rid of feminizing suffixes on job titles in German or other languages you use? Well, of course. I mean, this is how it has been for hundreds of years. Is that people said, "I'm hiring a Maschinenbauer. I'm hiring Sekretärin." So they just used the male word or the female word as they thought fit, or as they imagined the role to be. They said, "I'm hiring a Krankenschwester, a nurse," and a Schwester in German is a female word, it's a sister. So we literally say the patient's sister. And it's a very recent phenomenon that people have tried to find neutral ways of referring to professions in order to get rid of the stereotypes and also to create a more equitable workforce. So there were, of course, people saying that we shouldn't have these suffixes of star or innen or anything and just go back to just calling everything by the male names. But that's not an innovative call. It's just people who want everything to be as they have been for 100 years. And I know that for public job offers, what you see very often now is in parentheses M/F/D, or sometimes they put another letter to mean that yes, we're using the male word, but we're actually looking for male, female, or other gender people to fill this position, just to not to have to spell out all the words. So this is how it is in German. Like I said, in Spanish, they tend towards the generic feminine. And this is also something that I've seen in progressive writing for a long time now. Even in the 60s, you could find a book by a progressive author where they're saying um, they uh, the astronaut trained for many years, and finally the big day came, and here she was, and they just suddenly were throwing in a she where most people wouldn't expect it, which I guess is the equivalent of using the generic feminine in Spanish. Um, how would you translate the American conservative slogan, "The U.S. is a republic, not a democracy," into Greek? Sorry, that is beyond my abilities right now. Um, I'm not sure what the political terms would have to be to distinguish that, especially considering that democracy in Greece had a completely different meaning. Originally, it meant the rule by the wealthy male part of the population, and some of the greatest philosophers were arguing against democracy on that basis, that it's basically just good for the rich men. And what they were advocating, and what some are rediscovering now, is that rule by sortition can be helpful in some instances, because if you have politicians who need to get elected, of course, it means a huge advantage for people who can speak well, who have good looks, who have studied rhetorics, this kind of thing. But it is not representative of the population. So when you're trying to make a decision that really has to be representative and take into account a lot of different viewpoints, then it may be more useful to do a random selection from the entire population and have this body deliberate. And this is what they did, for example, in Ireland when they were discussing abortion, and they had a referendum on abortion in the entire country. And in order to decide what the question should be and what additional materials people should get, along with the call to vote on this referendum on abortion, they had a citizens' assembly with people randomly drawn. I think 100 people discussing the topic for several months. And then coming up with these questions. And for this, they randomly drew people, so they had everyone from elderly people to students, working class, and the very rich. And this was sorry, I'm really digressing, because this was supposed to be a talk about language, but I just think it's a very interesting concept. Obviously, you can't have a government chosen at random, because you need people who understand how things work. But for this kind of general, like an ethical question, I really believe that citizens' assemblies could do a lot more. Another question, Paula Lonergan, you mentioned finding native speakers with similar politics to learn these words. How would you recommend we do this? Well, well, the easiest, because it's really a broadcast channel, is Twitter. So if you look at who's tweeting against AfD, for example, in Germany, or who's using hashtag nie mehr CDU, these kind of hashtags that you see sometimes, you can find people who believe in the same thing, or you just look for the same topics. You can look for which German accounts are retweeting Greta Thunberg if you're looking for green opinions or something. So that's the easiest part. Now, if you, more useful would be to do that on Facebook, because then you see a lot more material, and it comes to your feed basically automatically. Didn't find Twitter so useful for that. So on Facebook, I guess you would have to join the right groups, to look for groups that seem to have the right titles and descriptions to make you believe that here may be people that have the same opinion or similar opinions as I do, and where I might find this. I mean, you could also go to a general discussion group, like a more open-ended one, and then just pay particular attention to the people that you agree with, or to try to find the differences of how they write compared to how others write. But it may be too difficult for language learners, so it's better to just look for your own kind of politics first, and then reach out to the broader society. I actually learned a lot of my English in political discussion forums, especially one called Global Affairs. This was when I was still in high school, and my essays were getting better every year. I started with a D in English, and by the end of high school, I had A in English, mainly because of these online exchanges, these political discussion groups, where, well, I wasn't writing too much, but there were a lot of people, Americans, Canadians with university degrees, some of them journalists, some of them other educated people, just writing about the day's politics, commenting on them, sometimes reposting news articles of the day. And so I just got used to this kind of writing. Basically, I knew how to structure a political essay even before we broached that topic in English class. And that really helped to adopt this kind of style just by having read a lot of it. Why do you think neologism irritates certain people so much while others embrace them? Well, I think that it's always a matter of well, most neologisms, people embrace them or not based on whether they have the same experience. So if you're the kind of person who really loves to just use a scooter, you go to a foreign city, use your smartphone to rent a scooter and just start going around, then you're probably annoyed at the neologism Rollerchaos. Yes. And if you're a supporter of FDP, like the right-wing party in Germany, you're probably not going to like Respektrente, which was also one of the words of the year. If you're a fan of a particular Italian politician and they call you Pasdaran, you're not going to like that. So I think it's a lot of it is about whether we personally believe that the term represents what is really happening or does not represent what's happening. So if you're a fan, but you don't think you have anything in common with the Revolutionary Guard, then you're not going to accept the word Pasdaran as a great idea. And if you think that coronavirus is dangerous, then you're going to object to every neologism that involves the word Schnupfen, like sniffles. So it's a matter of agreeing or not agreeing. But then also, there are purists who just disagree with any kind of neologism. They tend to be on the conservative side, but sometimes you have progressive people who also reject neologisms in language. And I think it's just this sense of purity. People talk about purity of an ethnic group, but they also talk purity of language. And for me, it's a very hard concept to empathize with, because languages are not pure. I think it was Shaw who said that the problem with defending the purity of the English language is that it's basically a horde, basically ran after people, drove them into dark alleys and rifled their pockets to find new vocabulary. So languages are always subject to evolution, and they will always have new words or cross mingling of other languages. And if you try to say, okay, I'm against neologisms, that means you still want to talk like they did in the 1800s. I don't think so. I think it's usually people who are offended by particular kinds of neologisms, but accept the need for certain others. I don't think many people would object to the word Brexit entering the language or coronavirus. So it's really a matter of whether we believe that these neologisms are useful and represent reality, or we don't believe so. Stephen asking, does or will Esperanto have a gender-neutral infix to replace the in that denotes femininity? The thing is that Esperanto words without an infix are supposed to be gender-neutral, right? So if you say amico, it could be a male friend or a female friend. The problem is that if you want to specify a female friend, You can do that with amikino, with the in infix. But people don't generally use this kind of infix for men now, or it doesn't even officially exist. There is the infix ich for this purpose, so you could say amikicho to say a male friend, and then amico is the neutral form. But because this suffix is not widely used, people also understand amico to be potentially a male friend, depending on how they use the language. Amico is understood to be a male friend or a friend whose gender you don't want to specify, and amikino is the female friend. But there is no real, yeah, it's a big discussion in Esperanto, especially with words like onklo, which is uncle, or aunt. But because of the root that was chosen, onklo, sounding so much like uncle, you don't really think that that it could be an aunt as well. So it's a difficult topic. Some suggest using ge for that. As you know, as an Esperanto speaker, you're using the ge prefix in order to create a mixed gender group. So ge onklo is aunts and uncles. Ge amikoi is a mixed gender group of friends. Ge fratoi, ge patroi is parents. So if you say ge patro without this plural y at the end, ge patro could be a parent. As opposed to patro, but theoretically, patro is supposed to be the gender neutral form. So, yeah, Esperanto has been around for too long. If it was invented like 20 years ago, it would probably have this kind of gender neutral thing from the beginning. But it was invented more than 125 years ago, and because of that, people just didn't pay so much attention to that at the time. Just like with our natural languages. Remy asking, how much would you say your involvement in DM25 is part of your language learning agenda? Well, the reason I'm this is actually a story I've told on Greek television. I was interviewed on the fourth biggest TV channel in Greece because of my language studies and because of my involvement in DM25, because they ran a headline, the German girl who learned Esperanto, who learned Greek because of Varoufakis. And of course, I had to correct them that it was not exactly because of Yanis Varoufakis, their former finance minister, but because of my passion for politics, for finding out what's really happening in the world. In 2015, I was very very into the news. I was following everything. It also because in Germany it was made to be a big deal. The newspapers were always running these headlines. That Greece is about to be thrown out of the Eurozone next day or the day after. If they don't find agreement, it's all over. So they were really scaring people and having these headlines. And I wanted to know what's really going on. So I learned Greek in order to understand this kind of news coverage and to read both German and Greek news, and sometimes English and French and so on for good measure, to get a more complete understanding of what's going on. And that really helped me get my Greek to a high level. And also, it led to me eventually becoming involved in DM25, because after the crisis, well, the brunt of the crisis had blown over, and Yanis Varoufakis had resigned. He was no longer a minister. He was still in parliament, but I just wrote to him an email, and like a cold email. I just found his address somewhere on a CV, somewhere on the internet, and wrote him and expressed my views on what had happened. And he said, you know, we mustn't lose hope. We must stay pro-European, and we must take back Europe from those that have usurped it. So that's how I got involved in DM25, because he was about to found it, and I helped him found the movement. And yeah, my first involvement was to run the translation of the website about to be published. So even now, DM25, if you sign up, you can use it in any of 7 official languages. And we're translating everything into 7 languages. So it's a big part of my day also to make sure that all of our content is in different languages. And of course, it's part of my language study. Okay, we have to stop now. Thank you all for watching, and hope to see you around. Also, feel free to write me on Twitter if you have extra questions or ideas. My Twitter name is German Polyglot. Thank you very much. See you.